Today we're talking about liability. Liability with business owners. Because a lot of people and business owners, they kind of think, you know what, like, they push it to the side. That'll never happen to me. I don't do anything, and I'm not in construction, so I don't have the possibility.
No one's gonna sue me. No one's gonna fall on my property.
I sell paper, what's risky about that except paper cuts?
I was gonna say, if you've seen The Office, that maybe there's a lot of liability.
It could be, especially if there's any lemon juice hanging around.
So yeah, I think it's a really interesting discussion to have, that there is a lot of liability that business owners could be exposed to that they may not know about.
Right. And the harshest way to find out about that is when you get a lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I was just having a conversation this week about a business owner that isn't in this state, but, he made some comments on social media. And now all of a sudden, he just got hit with a $3.5 million defamation suit. And they're thinking that it's going to take his company down just to defend himself. The bad part about it is he made a comment about an attorney, right? And then that attorney took offense and decided to sue him for defamation. But he was figuring that it was going to cost him $100,000 just to defend himself, whether he wins or loses, right?
That's crazy. So I think maybe we should start with, what are some of the biggest liability, challenges or threats that business owners face? And that's a really broad,
it's a huge topic,
discussion,
right?
But I think the biggest thing, when people think liability, they think lawsuits and they think insurance.
Yeah.
So in what circumstances would a lawsuit exceed insurance or be a big threat to a business owner?
I would almost say everyone. I don't know, like, even stupid things like you don't think about, right? But I think anytime you have a business, like the one that kind of comes to my mind anyway, slip and fall.
Yeah.
Right? Heaven forbid, somebody slips and falls on or in your property, right? And, everybody, again, you always think, well, that'll never happen, right? But when and if it does, what was the statistic? That the average cost to defend a slip and fall was
$10,000 to $50,000, and that's from Brown and Crouppen.
Yeah,
$10,000 to $50,000
just to defend yourself. And again, I don't think that includes a settlement or what the outcome is, but that's just the cost to defend. And that's unfortunate, but that's just something as simple as somebody is in or you're around your business, right, and your property that you control, and slips,
and they break their arm or they hit their head or
something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where, one of the things you want to look at is, okay, well, again, probably never happened. I don't know what the statistics are on that, but, if it does, that's a chunk of change just to defend yourself, right? But some of the other ones that I think are really interesting is, hey, you've got maybe employees driving around in a company car, right? They get involved in some form of an auto accident.
Yeah.
And some attorneys might, so you have your policy limits. They'll pay up to $100,000 or something like that, right, per accident, and depending on whether it's personal injury or whether it's damages or all those types of things. But here's the thing, right? Like, it is not that hard to rack up a $100,000 bill in an accident when automobiles these days routinely leave the dealership floor at over $100,000.
Yeah, a new pickup truck's $100,000.
Yeah, new one-ton diesel.
Yeah, you hit a sports car. You hit, I don't know how much a Cybertruck is, but a Cybertruck or
another Tesla, right?
Yeah, you're in a multiple vehicle accident. You're X, Y, and Z. You're in a pileup, and you're deemed at fault for 3 or 4.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see, well, okay, if that were to happen, or not that you're driving, maybe when your employees just ran an errand to go get, something from the store, that happens, they're on their cell phone, they get deemed to be liable, and then all of a sudden, you could be sitting on a, $100,000, $200,000 worth of damage, and your insurance company says, oh, well, we'll cover you up to $100,000, and then the next chunk above that is on you.
Right.
So
what can they do about it? What can business owners do about it? Because, they're paying their insurance premiums, and even above then, they could get an umbrella policy or something like that. But that's fairly standard stuff.
Yeah.
What goes above that? What should business owners be looking for in their business to kind of take their liability protection to the next level? It's to make sure that their personal assets and their business assets are protected from these risks.
Well, first things, right, so there's the basics, and everybody, I think the biggest problem is people don't even start with the basics. The basics is review your policy, right? And find out what kind of coverages you have and what gaps you have that may exist. A lot of times that, I think that you can basically just go through your policy, make a few adjustments, and it might be like $10 a month, but you could increase your coverages from maybe the state minimums to areas that seem more reasonable, right? Yeah. I think that's the first thing. And to go through them with an agent and you don't tell your agent, this is my opinion, hey, what is the cheapest coverage I can get? What you say is, hey, I need to make sure that my coverages are adequate for, a realistic accident. And what I found is that maybe if you're $100 a month and it goes to $115 a month, that's a 15% increase, which sounds like a lot, but $15 a month to make sure that, you don't get hit with, $100,000 bill.
Yeah. And that brings up a really interesting point, is that you can always pay for more coverage. I mean, to a certain extent, but you could always buy more insurance.
Oh yeah, you can buy insurance policies left and right
until you're blue in the face. You can be overinsured. So there are probably 4 main ways that you can deal with risk or loss. And I think we've talked about it before. And I think the first one is transfer it. Yep. So you can buy an insurance policy and transfer the risk to an insurance company, pay a premium to do that. Second one is you can avoid. You can not drive. You can not have a building. You can avoid that risk entirely by not participating at all. You can reduce, so you can have your employees, things like have your employees drive safer, follow the speed limits, put in GPS tracking to enforce that. So it reduces the risk of something like that, and you can retain. So retaining a risk is like, okay, you know what, I see that that's a risk and I know I'm a little underinsured there, but the cost of additional insurance is not worth the risk that I face there, so I'm going to just go ahead and retain that, and if something happens, that's on me, I'll pay for it.
Yeah, you're willing to assume the risk.
So I think those are the 4 ways that you can really deal with liability, and a lot of things fall into that category, or they're a combination of a couple of them. So I think you're right as far as, you can make sure your coverages are right, and then it goes, I think, deeper, and then you look at what other common issues business owners like you face, in your industry. If you have employees that are driving, if you're in construction, there's, accidents, things like that happen. If you're in the law, you need to make sure you have good E&O or law or medicine or whatever it is. You need to make sure you have the proper coverages there. And I think at the end of the day is a lot of this stuff as a business owner is out of your wheelhouse to an extent.
A lot of it is too, and I think so there's multiple layers, right? So some of the layers that maybe people don't look really closely at is contracts, right? Whether that be contracts with, suppliers or other people that you're dealing with, but do those contracts limit your liability? What's the wording in it? Are you getting your contracts, forgive me for saying this, but from LegalZoom or some free type of a thing, you found a contract online and you downloaded it and modified it yourself? Or, are you actually having somebody look at those contracts and saying, hey, maybe this contract doesn't apply in this state, or this has a clause that wouldn't really protect you, right? I'm a car guy, and so one of the things that we've done in the past, we've actually promoted and put together several different races. That's an area where, potentially you could have a big accident or potentially even death. And so one of the things we did was we made sure that whatever waivers we had people sign were concrete, right? And I didn't just grab a free one. I actually had one drafted by an attorney who had done one for other racetracks and had actually won in court with that contract. That type of thing, the leases that you have on your real estate, you need to read through those leases and make sure that you understand, what responsibilities lie where. I think that's an area. The other area that I think is really, really important for people, that this is all super boring stuff, but your LLCs.
Yeah, right? Your structuring documents.
So, okay, I've got an LLC. Well, does that mean that I'm automatically protected and nobody can penetrate the corporate veil, so to speak? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Especially those LLCs that you get for free, you've got to be really careful. And even if you have a great LLC, the way that you're running and managing your business and the way that the money flows through your business can either make that LLC really strong or it can completely dismantle it.
Yep.
The corporate veil thing. And so, those are different areas too, where you look at it and you say, okay, well, because you have your insurance and you've got your corporate structure that's supposed to protect your personal assets from behind it, but all those things can be penetrated if they're not done appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting concept, is that as a business owner, you have your business and you have yourself, and a lot of the times there's a lot of overlap between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's making sure that your insurance for the business is good and that the liability there is planned for. And then on the other side, you need to make sure your personal liability is planned for, that you have a good estate plan set up, and that those two work together. So you have your insurance specialists talking with your finance specialist, with your CPA, talking with your attorneys, making sure that everything is working cohesively, because if one piece of this plan is broken and a lawsuit is lobbed at your business, there could be an open door, an unlocked window, so to speak, in your plan that they can get in and come clean you out.
Oh, absolutely. And umbrella policies come in there, right? And depending on your business structure, your profession, other things that you do, umbrella policies a lot of times will have, you can't just say, well, I have an umbrella, so I'm golden. They'll have exclusions. Well, we will cover this, we won't cover that. Those types of things. And you're absolutely right. All the professionals need to be on the same page, because a lot of times I think people say to themselves, yeah, I've got structuring documents, I've got insurance, and I've got an umbrella policy. Well, you might have all three, but if they're not working together, or they all have the same gap, and so you have a wide open door somewhere, that's an area that can be a really big problem. Other areas that are really interesting is employee liability, where you've got somebody working for you, and maybe while they're working for you, they're up to no good. Heaven forbid, but it happens.
Yeah.
And okay, well, if that were to happen, again, looking at the way that you're structured, the coverages that you have, the employee agreements, whatever, there's so many different things, because businesses are so different, like you're saying, from construction to automobile racing, promotion, to a business that's just an office, so to speak, right? But cybersecurity, what about your data? And
I was just about to say, I think that's an ever increasing problem. Like, if you have sensitive client information, you've got social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license, like all that stuff on file. What are you doing to protect that? Are you insured against a cyber attack? Do your policies that you think cover you from any business incident, is there an exclusion for cyber attacks and ransomware? It's important to know, because I think there was, I don't have the source for it, but a small firm, over $100,000 in liability that they had to pay out because of a ransomware attack that they were subject to.
Yeah.
That's pretty serious.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things too, and again, not being an attorney, we're not giving legal advice here, but one of the things that you really want to avoid is negligence.
Yep.
Right? And so I think even if you go through the steps and you can show that, hey, we met with our legal counsel and our insurance specialists, and we've done all these things to protect, we've made changes to our company, is a really different scenario than just saying, oh, I don't know. I mean,
well, it hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet, and I don't know, I have an insurance policy.
I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never been sued. It's like, okay, that's totally fair.
Right.
And you've been retaining that risk for 20 years. But maybe as you're a business owner moving towards retirement, looking for an exit, you want to protect the thing that you've worked really hard for the last 20 years to build.
Yeah.
Losing it to a lawsuit now would suck.
Yeah, and like I say, understanding that difference between negligence and
retention,
an accident, and retention. There's some pretty big differences there, and the amount of liability you take on in between those definitions is really big. So, it stinks, and nobody likes insurance, right? Insurance is an interesting thing, because we all pay insurance, and it's something you pay for that you hope you never have to use, right? Like, I have a life insurance policy. I hope I never have to use it. I hope every dollar I put in that thing is wasted.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, but nonetheless, it's there for that reason. And insurance, liability insurance is the exact same thing. But nothing's worse than making that call to your insurance agent and saying, hey, I've got a problem. And they say, and then your insurance has been your buddy for, this whole time, all of a sudden looks at you and is like, oh, hey, yeah, we're not covering that.
You got some feelings about your boat, Richard?
I do have some feelings about that, right? But, it's true, though, when your heart sinks when you realize, oh, my gosh, I've got an open liability here, and it's going to cost me tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And so reviewing it is key. Now, the other thing that I would say too is it's not a one and done.
Correct.
Right? So when you review, it's something that realistically you should be reviewing every year. And it's amazing sometimes that, the insurance carriers, we just actually had this on one of our policies that I thought was really interesting. So because the number of natural disasters that have happened, a lot of the insurance companies, they sent us out this notice, right? And it said, hey, like, for example, if you replaced your roof because maybe a natural disaster came through and really damaged your building. It used to be that a lot of the insurance companies would be like, oh, well, the storm came through and it damaged your roof, we'll replace your roof. Well, because there's been so many natural disasters, now what they're doing when the insurance companies come in, some of them, not all of them, but a lot of them will come in and say, well, normally we would replace your roof and, that might be a $50,000, $60,000 bill, depending on the size of your building, could be more. But what they say is, but we're going to take that and we're going to basically depreciate how old the roof was. And so if your roof was 25 years old and it was a 30-year life expectancy, we'll pay for, 10%.
Yeah, based on their table, we'll depreciate the amount down and cut you a check for that.
Yeah, so if it was a $50,000 roof, they might give you $5,000 because they're like, well, the roof was already pretty much gone anyway.
Wow.
Right? But if you didn't know that and you think that you've got insurance, and that actually, we noticed that come across our desk on one of our policies for our building, and we addressed it and just said, hey, that's something that we need to really look at. And sometimes it's a matter of maybe one company does it and the other company doesn't, and that's something that you need to talk to your agent about. And other types of natural disasters, they're starting to exclude
wildfires in California.
Yeah, wildfires, right? A lot of people are like, what do we do? Because they couldn't transfer it to insurance companies because the premiums were going up so much. So then again, you've got to make some assessments and figure that out. But sticking your head in the sand or just saying, well, I don't know, I've worked with Joe for 20 years. He's always taken care of, never had a problem yet. I think that's one of the biggest risks that business owners have because we don't want to do it. You don't want to sit down and have that conversation. And especially, I think, where people get scared, this would be another one, I think, is people get scared because they know if you're sitting across from the table from an insurance salesman, and you say, do I have enough insurance?
They're gonna
try
and sell you some insurance.
Right? I think that's true unless you're working with the right guy.
Or a team of professionals.
Yeah, a team of professionals, right? Yeah. The right person, because the right person will tell you, I could sell you a ton of insurance and over-insure you, but I'm not going to do it. Let's talk about what you actually need and where the value is. And then if there are gaps that exist, let's talk openly about it. Do you want to assume this risk? What are the chances in Utah that you need tornado insurance? Slim to none.
Well, and it's interesting because I think you highlighted there's a difference between informed non-action and negligence.
Yes.
Like, if you just choose not to look at it and something happens, that's on you. But if you choose to look at it and you decide that, okay, I'm going to retain this risk, but I know it's a possibility, that can affect the rest of your plan and say, okay, maybe we have a little bit larger of a slush fund because of the retained risk that we have. Maybe we're keeping a little bit more cash on hand because we're choosing to retain X, Y, and Z, so that we could deal with it if something happens.
Yeah.
But if not, and you just say, I don't know, and then something happens, you're completely unprepared, that's going to throw off business operations or maybe personal pay, whatever it is. It's going to cause problems.
Yeah. And it happens, I would say, it seems the property and casualty, and again, not being a property and casualty
anecdotally,
person, but speaking from my personal experience, I've seen more changes in the P&C world in the last 3 years than in most other sectors. We just actually had this where, one of my trucks, it was weird. The insurance company, I've used this insurance company for probably, 6-7 years on my collector vehicles. And they called all of a sudden out of the blue and said, hey, we want pictures of all your vehicles and we want pictures of where they're stored, all this kind of stuff. And I said, fine, no problem. So we took pictures, sent them in. And then lo and behold, they came back and they said, we're going to continue to insure all of your vehicles except this one truck. And they've insured it for the last, I think, 10 years.
That's so silly.
And I was like, what? And I was like, what's the problem with the truck? And they're like, well, it has a flatbed on it. And I was like, what's the problem with the flatbed? And apparently, this company really has a problem. And the forms never specified it, does it have a flatbed or a normal bed? And so it never came up in conversation. Well, there was two things that were frustrating to me about that. Number one is, okay, now I got to go find another insurance company for this truck, right? And what I ended up doing is moving all of my vehicles from that one company to another company. But the second thing is that, was I not covered?
Yeah. Like if something had happened at that point.
Yeah. Would they have come back and said, "Oh, well, you didn't know this, but we knew this." But
you didn't tell us it had a flatbed, so we're not going to cover it.
Yeah. Like that kind of stuff is a little bit scary to me. And so on the one hand, I was very frustrated at the situation. On the other hand, I'm very grateful because I'm like, okay, well, I need to find out. And the other restrictions that the other companies are talking to me about is, well, hey, because it's a collector vehicle, just so you know, you can't haul anything in the back of this, right? And I'm like, this is crazy. It's a truck. It's an old collector type truck, and I like it, but still, if sometimes I want to drive it around and throw something in the back, well, apparently I can't do that. And they're starting to have other restrictions as far as like which of my kids can drive my collector's vehicles and which ones can't. And each one, interestingly enough, has different restrictions. And on some of those things I can understand it, but those are little changes that you don't think a lot about.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, they could have a huge financial impact if one of my kids is in my collector truck and it's got something in the back of it and they hit an AMG Mercedes, right? And I get the phone call that they say, "Hey, Rich, by the way, because it has a flatbed and you had something in the back and your kid was driving it, we're not covering a dime." Like, that's a problem for me.
Yeah.
And I want to know about it rather than finding out the hard way.
Well, I think it's interesting. At the end of the day, like, there is no perfect plan. There is no way to avoid all of this 100%, because life is weird and there are always extenuating circumstances. But what you can do is stress test your scenario and come up with a plan that allows you to feel comfortable with the amount of risk you're retaining. To feel comfortable with, okay, I can act in confidence as a business owner, as an individual, that I can do what I need to do with the amount of risk I'm facing. Whereas if you have no idea and you're walking around, you could be stumbling into problem after problem after problem and not realize it, narrowly avoiding these things. And it could be a big problem for your business and then your personal life as well.
Yeah. But like you said, maybe you're comfortable with it, and there are people that do that. And some people get away with it. And, you always hope that. But, other companies, you know what, I know several very successful business owners that have come very close to losing everything, so to speak, having a devastating loss over a lawsuit that they weren't counting on, and it came from a place that they never would have predicted it came from, right? And like I say, sometimes even if you win the lawsuit, but you spend $100, $200 plus $1,000 defending yourself, is that something that you really can just feel comfortable writing a check for? Because it's something that you really need to assess all the time, and hopefully, I think, in my experience, the initial part is the roughest part. What I mean by that is the first time you go in and you go through the hey, are my structuring docs the way that they should be? Is my umbrella policy the way that it should be? Is my policies the way? That's the hardest one. And then as you review every year, and you need to tell your agents and your professionals, I want to review this every year, it's easy because once you have the initial plan, the first question is, hey, has anything changed?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Well, then my question back to my agent is going to be, has anything changed with my policies? Has my carriers changed any definitions, their coverages, anything like that? Probably not. Hopefully not. Okay, great. Then just review it. Are we still comfortable carrying this risk? Are we still comfortable with the coverage limits? Great. Most of the time that's going to be good, right? Or maybe I've changed something. Hey, I decided to open a new business, or I bought another property, or I did something else. And then we can address the little things. But the initial thing of going through the process is the worst one, but it's also the most educational, right? Because that's where you find out if any gaps exist. If so, how big are they? And let's address them or not address them, but at least you know.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think liability is a big part of a holistic financial plan. It's kind of why we're talking about it. We're passionate about it. If this stuff is interesting, you can head to our website, wheelhousewealthmanagement.com. You can download a full guide that has 5 steps for business owners, things they can do to better prepare for retirement and save a bunch of money along the way. So
check it out.